Come on. Come on.
How does having kind of the defense loaded up in the offseason here kind of give you, does it give you a little more energy, a little more excitement heading into camp?
Well, I like to think that no matter what, I'm going to bring everything I got effort-wise, energy-wise, but I know it drives competition, and that makes us better as a team. It makes the offense better. It makes us on defense better, pushing each other, and so that's been fun to see.
Nick, can you talk about your relationship with Kai Campbell and what he means to the team, that the fact that he's here now, all the history?
Yeah, twofold. The player. I love a big, violent defensive lineman that can disrupt the passer and play the run, which is something he's done for a long time and still can do it at a high level. But the leadership, and honestly, the leadership with knowledge, because it's not just showing players, his teammates, on how to go about your business like a pro, but some of the stuff that he has that he can share to that defensive line room from a technical standpoint, or even that I can talk to him about schematically, like it's phenomenal. And he's been on some defenses, with my opinion, which had really good schemes that were a little bit different than us, and I can pick his brain on those type of things. So a lot of value in more than just the player that he brings to this locker room team.
Well, Monty and JG had said he has exceeded their expectations that they had of him coming in. What were your kind of preconceived notions of Calais coming in, and what has that?
I knew he was going to be a phenomenal guy, just from everything that I was able to hear from other people, but observe. And I think he's been exactly that.
You guys talk a lot about winning behavior, and
yeah, we do. I like that. I like that right there.
And Kai Campbell's a winner.
Yeah.
The guys won. If he was with the Super Bowl team here, how valuable is it to have a guy like that that can teach these younger guys what it's like to be a winner on and off the field, like taking care of your body, being prepared, all that?
Yeah, I think, the game is about winning. And so we talk about how can we win, right? Everything we do comes back to this is going to help us win. But those Sundays, coming up during the season, that's not something we can control at this moment. And so what we focus on is the controllables, which is that winning behavior. So from a day-to-day perspective, absolutely displays it, holds people accountable to it, because that's what it takes, of being present, setting your focus for what you have to do in that current moment and throughout the day, because the day is different. There's different things you need to improve on, whether it's the meeting room, weight room, on the field, walkthrough, to achieve winning. And that's really where the winning behavior comes in and sets a standard for it.
I know we've got a long time before you know exactly who's going to be on the roster and who might be active on game days, but I'm curious kind of how do you start approaching, you've got all these defensive linemen, they're all good defensive linemen. How do you approach how the snaps get doled out, in terms of, are you looking into, Calais is always talking about, okay, I can only do so much to be effective. Are you measuring in age? Are you measuring in how well they're playing? How do you end up figuring out what the snap rotation is going to be?
That's not something that has to get figured out. You're talking about the snap rotation on a day-to-day?
Yeah, when you get to games, how much everybody's playing, is it based on how they're playing? Do you go into it thinking, I want to have this guy play this many snaps? Is it
to a degree. We definitely have the goal of these guys have to help us win games throughout the whole year. And there is kind of let's not get above this with each game, and each guy could be different with what their number is, depending on maybe years in or, certain points in the year. Maybe they're feeling really good or they need a little bit of more rest. And then, the other reason for that is you want them fresh. But to hit those exact numbers, it depends on the game plan. It depends on who's up on game day. It depends on what personnel packages you're using, where you want to use guys. So a lot goes into that. I think what's important right now is to have some, forward thinking on where guys could be, and make sure that they're in positions where they are starting to get those reps. You're talking about it in the meeting with them, because the more a guy can do, the more we can do schematically on a week-to-week basis, right? And so that's where, currently, hey, does this guy have to be able to play this spot and this spot, and this guy's got to be able to play this spot and this spot, and then in the rush groups it's this. So just having that foresight of what could come and making sure that you're not leaving anything where it's all of a sudden during the season you're asking a guy to do something he hasn't worked at yet.
In the context of what you're trying to accomplish this season, what are the pros and cons of having such a green cornerback room?
I don't know if I look at it as pros and cons. It's more about just how do we get these guys to play at their highest level. Fortunate for us, in that whole secondary, it's a good mix of young guys and veterans. And honestly, I look at Garrett as a veteran. I know it's year 3, but he is extremely intelligent and he's very comfortable with what he's doing. So, it's a blend, which is good. But ultimately, you're just trying to get guys to play at the highest level. And fortunate for us, those young guys are smart. So there isn't really like whoa, these guys are too young, let's pull this back. I mean, that hasn't even crossed my mind.
Garrett Williams played outside in college. Hasn't really played outside here in your scheme yet, although we've seen him outside quite a bit in practice. And I know we've asked about it before, but can you just refresh on the differences physically and mentally that is asked of him when he's going from inside to outside and vice versa, and the level of difficulty to do that?
Yeah. Two difficulties is schematically different, but Garrett has the knowledge where he understands the totality of the coverages or even the totality of the defense where he knows everything already. I think he could play all 5 spots. And from a technique standpoint, the techniques change. And even in man-to-man coverage, slot technique is different than a corner's technique on the outside. So, it's just something that he's been working on. He's worked both techniques since he's been here. And you can see he's at a really good, comfortable level getting those reps in practice and in individual and things like that. So they are different positions. I will say this, they are both high stress positions. In fact, that you got to cover some really good players, and people can move people around. Sometimes you'll get an outside receiver in the slot, sometimes out at corner you'll get a smaller body. But he's doing a really good job of handling both from both the mental and the technique side.
What has put Baron Browning in a position to have a hot start to camp here?
What's put him in that position? Yeah. He has. With his preparation, I mean, I'm serious. Like, he is serious about what he does, and he's talented. And so, like, I always talk about with the players, like, why are you here? And number one is their team first, and that's Baron 100%. So he fits exactly what this locker room is. Number 2 is I say you love ball. And when I say you love ball, that means you are willing to put in that work and sacrifice to maximize yourself as a player. And that's what I have seen him do since he's been here. And I know he does it when I don't see him in the building. And then number 3 is you got a skill set. And that's why you guys are in those seats. And so, like, he hits all 3 of those, and it's, hard work pays off.
Going back to the cornerback room, with that room, are there things that you're looking for that will indicate to you that group has taken the next step in? And what are some of those things that you can see that show you that group has elevated itself?
It comes down to point of attack wins, ultimately. Job of the corner is to deny the ball, and the ability to disrupt the ball, whether that's creating PBUs that can lead to takeaways or taking the ball away themselves. So, you get to see that through competitive practices. You get to see it through the preseason, and, that's something that you can gauge on where is our level at right there. And, the higher that level, the more that they can take on that stress over and over again.
Max Melton said to us, hey, the scheme can be tough as a rookie, right, to mastery. He said Will Johnson is ahead of where he was this time last year. What have you seen out of Will, and what have you seen on the field of him as well? I mean, how NFL ready is he?
Yeah, I would say both Will and Denzel, for being rookie corners, they don't feel like it. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Barron is the preparation. I mean, those guys are in early. They're staying late. They're doing everything they need to do to reach a level of mastery, right? And they're not there quite yet because it takes repetition, right? I always tell the players, like, I know this defense very well, but if I went out there, I guarantee you I would bust because it's just different when you're out there having to execute it. So they're putting in the work to get to that point, and that's why it's smooth for them right now. You don't see a lot of mental mistakes. And, there's things to clean up with the technique, but what you see is when the ball's going their way, they're competitive. I'm not saying they're winning every single rep, but there's a good amount of clips on tape where those guys are winning their one-on-ones, and that's what you want out of that position.
Given the fact that
it's getting competitive in here right now, but I will answer both questions, I promise.
given the fact that
We're in a competing phase. I don't know if JG said that. Roles will get defined when we get to the season, okay? But I love the competitive nature in here.
given the fact that Walter was around all offseason, obviously he's missing some crucial stuff right now. Where is he when he comes back? Is he going to be significantly behind? Do you feel comfortable that he knows enough stuff that he could ramp up fairly quickly, or kind of how are you looking at him?
I mean, that's something that we can gauge when that time comes. One thing that I'm constantly reminding Walt, because I know he's dying to be out there, is you just control those controllables every single day, whether that's attacking his physical bucket, his rehab, or mastering in the meeting room. And so I think if he keeps doing those things, whether we ease it back or we put the pedal to the metal is something we got to judge in that moment, but it's not going to take long for him to get going. One thing that I was able to see in the spring is he puts in the effort to learn things, and he grasps things pretty fast. And then when you make a correction, you really don't see that mistake again. So he takes to the field pretty quick. So I'm confident that he's putting in the work that he needs to right now, and when that time's ready, he's going to be ready to go.
This discussions like for Mack to take kind of the Mike linebacker role, transition there, become the green dot wearer, call the defense, and then what have you seen from him early on in that role?
Yeah, I actually started by asking him what he thought of it, and he said, whatever you ask me to do, just tell me, and I'm going to get it done. And so I was like, okay, sounds good. So, then it was a staff discussion on, would he be able to play that role? And I knew this going into this season from last season is he's natural. He's a natural linebacker. Behind the ball, like I said, what's the job of the linebacker? Hit the ball. And he can do that. And so it was like, Mack, here's how the communication's going to have to be. Here's what you're going to have to do as far as terms of setting it. And that's been really smooth. I would say even back in the spring, I told him, man, it feels like you've kind of been the green dot in this defense for years. That's how well you're operating. So I'm pleased with that. And I think that just goes into, he's a football player. He's up here, really sharp. And so he's doing a good job.
With Eliza Jones, I know last year you spoke very highly of him. Considering he missed last year, where do you think he's at now in terms of his? I know recovery. He's clearly out in the field. He's feeling good, but with his knowledge of the system and just trying to get out there.
Yeah, I think he's made some huge strides. You talk about knowledge of the system, not making a lot of mistakes out there, and I've seen certain parts of his game elevate, and so I'm pleased with that. And I want him to keep striving because I think he's made strides, and I know he's got more in the tank to continue to get better.
Along the lines of the jump, what have you seen from Darius?
Yeah, playing good football honestly right now. I like where he's at in the run game, and he actually asked me last night, what do I need to work on? So there's some things that I said, hey, you need to work on this and this, and then as a rusher, I think he's really getting a good grasp of his identity and what he wants to do as a rusher. I'm excited to see it today. That's really one of the things I got an eye on is how does D-Rod rush today? Because it's, so much of being a rusher is being a technician and understanding how you're attacking and not just, going about it without a plan. Yet at that same time, you might have a plan in your head, but it still has to be a fast, violent rush, and you got to be ready to react and adjust. And so, I've been pleased with the strides he's made in that regard of the plan of attack and the rush, executing what I think he does really well as a rusher. You don't need to do a lot. What are you good at? And go master that. So things that I still want him to see him take a jump today. One day at a time, I want to see a jump with certain things in the rush, but I have been pleased at the progress.
I want to ask about you. What have you learned from your first 2 years here, and have you made any changes going through your third season with the Cardinals?
Yeah, there's always changes. There's changes from scheme or techniques, or even just the organizational management of what I can control with the defensive staff and the players. From how I delegate things to the autonomy I give. I know this, like when you have coaches that you feel are really good at their job, you let them go to work. And right now I feel like I'm letting the coaches go to work, and I think they're doing a phenomenal job of being teachers of scheme in the meeting room. They're being teachers of motor learning on the grass. And, I'm pleased with those guys. And I told the staff, I said, if we put our heads together on everything going forward this season, the knowledge that we can create is exponentially greater than just me telling you guys, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And so I want them to take things that I set forth and run with it and make it better. So I think they're doing a great job with that. That's just things that, as you go about, being in a leadership position, that you're able to adjust, and things change over the years. And as coaches get more comfortable and they get better, right, and there's growth, it can change what your day-to-day looks like, in my position.
Last question. Tore down the whole playbook and rebuilt in the offseason. How long of a process was that, and how does it help you this year?
Yeah, that's kind of my philosophy every year, to be honest, because the game changes and you have to think critically. You have to critically look at everything you do and ask yourself, why are you doing it? And then ultimately, when you're putting it together, it's got to be pieces of the puzzle that fit a grand scheme. So ultimately, you don't want to ever be in the point of a season where you're making up a lot of things week to week, because to me, it stresses you out as a coach. It stresses the players out mentally, where I want them playing as free and fast as possible. But also, you don't have it ironed out as much as you think, and you go through those rules, you don't have it ironed out. And so that process in the offseason of really evaluating where do we think offenses are going this next year, what's going to change, how are people playing us, and what do we do that we could do better? How could we set it up better? How could we have better terminology? What could we add? What could we take out? We put in something that honestly we went back and forth on as a staff for about 2 months, and it took that process of going through that to really actually figure out, man, wow. When we finally got to the end of it, we were like, well, this is actually now really simple, and we definitely made it the best we could. I'm glad that we took our time going through that. And then last night, Sweaty starts telling me about how dumb it is. I'm like, Sweaty, this took us 2 months. He's like, why don't we just do this? I'm like, no, Sweaty, man, we had 2 months, man. Let's just try it for a little bit longer. So that's my philosophy every offseason, is to critically look at it. To say you tear it down to the bare minimum, that there's definitely things that we did last year that we still have, and even back to year one. But I do believe that is what you should do every single year.
Thanks, Coach.
Appreciate you guys.